hear me?
Hi, Michael.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me on. I do appreciate it. So my name is Michael Hull. I was a U.S. history teacher in San Antonio, Texas for a Title I school district. I'm a cancer survivor, and I'm a guardian and a caretaker for my sister and my elderly uncle. I was a member of AFT. I am a member of AFT, and I was a member of NEA. And I'm also part of the Teachers Rank and File Safety Committee in Texas. And I was told, essentially, you need to come back, even though you have a doctor's note that says it is very dangerous for you to return. And they told me, you're going to come back or you can go on FMLA. And so FMLA is unpaid. I decided I didn't want to burden my co-teacher. I didn't want to burden my students. They needed a certified teacher. So I decided to quit. And I'm not the only one in this situation. In Austin, they purged it was close to 1,000 people, pregnant women, people with cancer, people with all sorts of underlying conditions. I know someone personally that was forced back into school and caught coronavirus. They caught coronavirus and now they're on oxygen. They have lung damage. They've had strokes. People have died. I actually started a group called Teachers Against Dying because people are dying. And so we've got a study out of Montreal, and it says the children's infections precede the adults. We had a major study in Science. It said 41 countries were surveyed, and what was the best government mitigation strategy? They found that the second best mitigation strategy was closed in the schools and the universities. We had a Chicago Department of Health. They said nearly a quarter of these cases have been transmitted in school. And then just common sense, the pediatric cases are now up to like 3.2 million, when it was thought in the beginning that they don't even catch coronavirus because they weren't in school to catch coronavirus and spread it. And as we know, they are vectors in the community because they're typically asymptomatic, but we have had children die. In Texas here, we had a kindergartner die of coronavirus. So it's just been a tragedy. And here I am. Luckily, I was able to dip into my savings, and I'm going through financial hardship here. And I just feel like, where was my voice? Where is the voice of those that feel like this is not safe? Because in reality, it's not. Even if you get vaccines, and I do commend Joe Biden for bringing us up to the top of the list, but at the same time, we've got new strains emerging. We've got class sizes increasing. In my state of Texas, they have lifted the mask mandates, and certain school boards have decided, hey, guess what? We're gonna let the parents decide. And so they're not scientists and they're not doctors, and so that's who's deciding these things. And if you talk to teachers on the ground level, it's kind of like what Kelly said. You can have these ideals of a CDC guideline, but in a lot of cases, it ain't happening. And we're putting life and death in the hands of kids, and in some cases, adults that don't even believe the coronavirus exists. So one of the benefits I'm supposed to have as an AFT member is a voice at work and in the democracy. And I read a recent article with you, and it said you were working with Joe Biden and calling the White House 15 hours a day to get the schools reopened. And I'm just thinking, in lieu of all of this evidence, and people are going to die, why do we keep doing this? Why don't we shift from safe reopening, which was the initial stance of AFT and NEA to work with the American Academy of Pediatrics? Why don't we shift that towards actually fighting the people that we should be fighting? Because one of the reasons you have a union is to stand up against the elite. And I feel like we're kind of collaborating, or we're working with them very closely to open the schools instead of fighting them to close them down. Dr. Michael Osterholm, who was Biden's coronavirus task force leader, he said we should do like the other countries. We should do a lockdown, a UBI, get the vaccine distributed. And guess what? The stock market took a turn for the worse, and they pivoted immediately. So these are the people that are in it for the reason that we all know, which is they need the economic driver. They have to have a subsidized daycare for the employees of the rich, for these elite oligarchs, who, by the way, both parties funneled and transferred wealth up to in the CARES Act. For all the money we spend on
So Michael, I gotta just, look, I respect what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I respect what you're saying. I have spent hours and hours myself. I'm not a scientist. My sister's a scientist. She's an intensive care pediatrician. My brother-in-law's a scientist. He's a radiologist. They both have been working through COVID in COVID wards. We have 250,000 nurses who we represent, respiratory therapists and nurses, been working throughout this in person. We have hundreds of thousands of educators who have been working in person. We have fought for making sure, after talking to hundreds of experts, including Michael Osterholm, we have tried to come up with the best strategies possible to stop transmission in schools, to actually have the testing that's needed, and to actually have vaccine access. We've also fought really hard to make sure that people who are at risk have accommodations. And in places like Austin, in places like San Antonio, we have helped provide money to fight and to have lawyers fight for the accommodations. Schools are going to reopen. They're reopening now. The overwhelming evidence at this moment in time is that they are safe with these mitigating factors. You disagree deeply about it. The body of evidence that Biden is looking at, the new CDC director, who everyone believes is honest and transparent, that's where the body of evidence is in the United States. That's where the body of evidence is in WHO. I've just gotten off the phone with UNICEF and UNESCO. That's where the body of evidence is. I know that that is not a risk that you either want to tolerate or can tolerate, and I respect you for it. And what we can try to do, if you want, is try to get you the accommodation that you need. But this is not, and what may happen with a variant may happen, and then we're going to close the way in which things have gotten closed. But at the end of the day, the judgment in the United States, I'm not talking about Texas with the no mask mandate and fighting that, but the judgment in the United States is that schools are going to be reopened if they can reopen safely. And that is what we are trying to do. And I'm going to say one more thing, which you are not going to like, which is that we have an obligation to our members, we have an obligation to students, and we have an obligation that if we can make it safe, that students actually need to be in school in person. And ultimately, that is what we have, after talking to lots of people and exploring our own souls. That's where the most of our members are. We've asked for people's voice. We've had these conversations. We've done polling over and over again. But that's where people are. Having said that, if there is an issue in terms of accommodation, we're going to fight for that. But we're not going to fight to keep the schools closed unless there's a variant that makes it an emergency. And then we'll fight to keep the schools closed, like they are in Great Britain and like they may be in other places as well.
Okay, well,
Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate that, and I thank you for extending way past 20 minutes past the time. And thank you, Michael, for so bravely speaking what you were feeling. I always enjoy hearing you speak. So here we are at 9:20, a year after COVID closed down many of our